Hello YouTube, this is Peter with you once again, and today I want to talk about... Okay, guess I can't make a video on that subject. How about I talk about... or... 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 no, those won't work either. So, maybe instead I'll talk about appeasing the eldritch gods of the YouTube algorithm, and how, in order to not run afoul of the demonetization scheme that is now operating on YouTube, you basically can't say or talk about anything controversial, swear. It has to be all completely clean and non-controversial. And what inspired me to make this video was a couple of things. One was a video by the cynical historian who talked about what happened with his video about Schindler's List and talking about the Holocaust and the context surrounding the movie and the problems that other historical channels have had on YouTube. And the other main thing, and by the way, I'm going to post playlists to a lot of this in the description, so definitely check the description for playlists, for links to other videos and things on this topic. But the other thing that got me was watching a video in which the woman in the video was talking about Christian nationalism and the book in particular, Kingdom Coming by Michelle Goldberg. That's a book I read maybe 10 or 11 years ago. It's a good book. I'd recommend it. But in the book, she kept not saying the word fascist. She would just like, word I can't say. And I've seen this more and more and more with various YouTube users in which they'll not say a specific word, or they're like, oh, you know that thing, or I'm going to come up with another way of saying something like that. And I can understand people maybe not wanting to swear in their videos, or just, saying something akin to swearing, like, oh, frack this, I've been recently rewatching Battlestar Galactica, but that's another story. And anyway, I can understand that. Some people, they don't necessarily want their own brand and public image to be associated with profanity. But when they're coming up with alternative ways or censoring themselves for saying basic words like fascism or talking about a historical subject, you have to realize that this is getting to the point where it's kind of ridiculous. And there's two main things that get me about this. There's no real transparency. So in the description, I'll post a link to a spreadsheet and also a link to a video by a YouTuber who is basically attempting to systematically post short videos with different tags and descriptions to figure out which words trigger the demonetization algorithm. And the spreadsheet goes and says, green words are okay, and the yellow words and red words are the ones that are going to have a problem with being demonetized. And although you may think that some of it might be controversial, like racial slurs, there has also been a lot of talk amongst gay YouTubers, that LGBTQ plus YouTubers, that they are being demonetized for using words like gay. And this is, again, as other people have stated, sort of flies in the face of the pro-LGBTQ plus stance that Google and YouTube claim to have. And that's a whole other issue that's been discussed in more detail in other videos. So you have LGBTQ plus people being affected by this in an unfair way. You have you have historians being affected by this, trying to talk about historical events that apparently are being deemed controversial, whereas other channels, news channels and entertainment channels, they get special treatment. And I remember there used to be this skit on a Nickelodeon show where they said, you can't say that on television. Well, there's a lot of things that you could talk about on television that apparently you're not supposed to talk about on YouTube. Now, I understand some of you might hear this and think, well, they're saying these things and it's getting demonetized, but that's just being demonetized from YouTube. And maybe they should look elsewhere for ad revenue. But it's more than that, because although I personally don't monetize my videos, and I stopped monetizing my videos years ago, but a couple years after that, YouTube basically removed me from the partnership program because they decided to arbitrarily change their metrics from things like subscribers and views to instead watch time. And I don't put out videos consistently enough to reach that watch time, so I don't monetize my videos, but it still affects basically anyone who makes any kind of YouTube video. If you're not getting your videos monetized, then the YouTube algorithm gods are far, far, far less likely to promote your video, to show it in recommendations. It just gets buried, and it sometimes, and this is a controversial subject that some people don't think this actually happens, but there are cases where a video just might not show up in a subscriber's feed. The algorithms of what decides what gets shown to whom are very capricious and are difficult to understand, and it basically, you have to, make ritual sacrifices to the gods of the YouTube algorithms if you want your stuff to get out there. But if your video is demonetized, it's just like, you have blasphemed against the algorithm gods, and you will be punished by having your video basically demoted in its system. And this can affect things like channel growth, reach, all sorts of things. It is a system of playing favorites. Now, of course, there are going to be some people who say, well, the censorship of conservative, etc., etc. I think what I'm talking about here is related, although there's not an entire overlap. But the real truth is what is happening doesn't particularly have any ideology. Some might argue that it does, and those of you who have done a deeper dive into this might make a case that it's favoring one ideology over the other. But it seems to me related to the ad apocalypse, in which mainstream media beat up on YouTube for having commercials running on questionable content, and that caused YouTube to freak out and create the ad revenue apocalypse. There was also this issue of kid-friendly YouTube and the enforcement of these rules, where every YouTuber had to click this little thing that says, yes, my videos are child-friendly, or no, my videos are not child-friendly. And I made various videos on a lot of these subjects in the past, and the ad revenue apocalypse, the change in the metrics of how videos are what videos they want to promote in a lot of these subjects. And YouTube can be a very hostile place for trying to grow and sustain a channel. And situations like this make it extremely frustrating. But this, to me, goes beyond merely being a problem of basically being able to grow a channel. To me, it is cutting off the ability of having an adult conversation on this site about any sort of serious issue. If your video is just going to be doomed to oblivion because you use the word fascist, I personally am not interested in making videos where I self-censor to that degree. I mean, I can refrain from swearing in my videos. I generally speaking try not to swear too much in my videos. But if I'm saying like, oh no, I can't say that word because the YouTube algorithm gods might banish my video to the dark realm or something. No, I'm really having difficulty imagining the YouTube that I don't want to say grew up with, but that I came up with in my 20s, basically, and even into my early 30s. Imagining the sort of culture that was on YouTube, the very changes to the site like this would have made it impossible. And it just makes YouTube a far less interesting place. And it kind of sticks things between a rock and a hard place. Because on one hand, we can see situations where people try and say, I'm going to create a social media platform that's going to be completely pro-freedom of speech. People say whatever they want. There's going to be no censorship, no moderation, and then it instantly becomes a cesspool and that nobody really wants to deal with. On the other hand, you can have increasingly draconian, arbitrary rules on places like YouTube, and that also kills off a certain spirit of I don't even necessarily want to frame this in terms of freedom of speech, but when people are engaging in this kind of self-censorship or not talking about certain issues or using certain words in order to skirt these seemingly random, arbitrary guidelines of what is and is not acceptable to not be banished into oblivion by the YouTube algorithm gods, then it really creates a just oppressive culture where whatever was interesting about making videos on this site sort of dies. And this isn't some melodrama of, I'm not going to make YouTube videos anymore if this is the way it's going to be, but it gives me serious pause. I'm in a somewhat different position than a lot of people because, as I said, I once upon a time was a partner. Then they arbitrarily decided that to change their metrics, and I'm no longer a partner. I gave up on monetizing my videos even before that because, to be frank, my channel was never big enough to make a substantial amount of money. And at the same time, though, I see that it's become, over the last several years, partly my own fault, but partly because of the algorithm, difficult to regrow my channel, even to the point where it was several years ago, and it's been on a slow downward trajectory. And again, part of that is my own fault, not making videos often enough. But another part of it is that what is decided is acceptable content, the content that the YouTube algorithm gods will promote. I haven't sacrificed enough virgins or whatever I'm supposed to do to get the algorithms to like me. It's frustrating for YouTubers at all levels, whether your videos are monetized or not. And the culture that it creates, I believe the word is chilling effect, or the phrase is chilling effect. And it's not necessarily ideologically driven, as a lot of people would contend that it is. Nonetheless, it has certain ideological effects. A YouTube where people can't talk about so-called controversial subjects, at some level, isn't YouTube anymore. This, for me, is probably one of my primary social media sites, not only because I have a channel on here, but I spend a lot of time watching videos on various subjects that could theoretically be considered controversial. I'm not going to the trending page and going, oh, what's the latest Jimmy Fallon clip to watch? I'm watching a variety of different things. Some of them are completely uncontroversial. Some of them could be construed as controversial. And if all of the things that someone could somehow construe as controversial were to suddenly vanish from this site, or to people to stop making this sort of content, I would be done with this site. And I don't just mean in terms of making videos like I am now. I mean in terms of watching the site. If interesting channels that talk about, controversial or historical things are no longer allowed to talk about these things, and all we're left with is the YouTube trending page garbage, then they can just shove it all up their ass, because I'm not really interested in that. What makes YouTube interesting is being able to talk about a variety of subjects that you wouldn't necessarily hear talked about in regular television or in scripted broadcast television and conventional old media like that. So they can only take this so far before they just kill what makes YouTube interesting. And again, YouTube and Google are relying on trying to do everything through algorithms and machine learning. And we used text-to-speech recognition, and he used the word fascist. Now we got to demonetize this video. That sort of thing. Their human review process is a joke. That's an ongoing problem with things like false flagging and all that kind of stuff. These are all subjects that have been covered by other people, that I've covered in other videos, but I just simply found a lot of this disturbing and disheartening when someone's like, I can't say the word fascist because, demonetization. A world in which people can't speak their minds within certain reasons of what would have been allowed on television. If it's that draconian that you're not even allowed to say certain words, and it's harsher than even the standards and practices of television or a movie. Otherwise, you're destined to obscurity or to have your content removed. Then I think YouTube is doomed, basically. So give me your thoughts on all of this. Check in the description for links to other videos about this subject, and have a good whatever time it is.